Before memory foam, before pillows that cooled themselves, before headboards, sheets, mattress tags, and the ongoing war between too many and not enough blankets, there was sleep, raw, uncertain, strange, beautiful sleep. We tend to think of sleep as simple something we do at the end of a long day, collapsing into a curated, fluffed rectangle of fabric and springs. But sleep is one of the most ancient, most mysterious, and most evolving rituals in human history. The strange truth is, for most of the time humans have been on this planet, beds did not exist. Let that land gently in your mind. No beds, no bedrooms, no bedtime stories, just people, lying down somewhere and hoping the darkness would pass gently. What did they sleep on? What did they sleep with? Did they sleep alone or in groups? Was it even all night? And what does all of this tell us about our own relationship to rest, ritual, comfort, and even fear? This book is not a racing history full of war, kings, and plagues. It's the other side, the quiet, invisible, still side of history. It's about where the powerful and the powerless went when their eyes grew heavy and the firelight dimmed. It's about the ordinary bodies that curled into furs, into soil, onto woven reeds or animal hides. And somehow slept. We single quotes, LL lie down with Neolithic villagers in mud huts, where straw was a luxury and the snoring of goats was your lullaby. We'll whisper through Egyptian tombs where the dead were given beds before the living ever truly had them. We'll sleepwalk through Greek symposiums, Roman estates, Japanese tatami rooms, and medieval haylofts full of lice and prayers. We'll learn about segmented sleep. People used to wake up in the middle of the night on purpose, and we'll study when privacy, darkness, silence, and comfort became expected instead of exceptional. What emerges is something oddly comforting. That sleep has always been a little awkward, a little improvisational, and always deeply human. Even today, with our smart lighting and $2,000 mattresses, we are still seeking what they sought: relief, safety, and peace of mind. This book was written for quiet hours, for nights when you want to drift but your mind won't cooperate, for when modern life gets too loud and you need something ancient, slow, and oddly soothing. So settle in. Don't worry about the dust mites or the uneven ground. We're going to take this slowly. Close your eyes whenever you want. You won't miss much, just a few facts about how monks slept sitting up to avoid temptation, or how samurais chose where to rest based on which direction the wind carried the sound of blades. The kind of facts that help you forget your deadlines. Let history lull you, not with trumpets or revolutions, but with quiet corners, borrowed cloaks, and the universal search for a place to rest your bones. This is a story made to be forgotten. That's what makes it so perfect for sleep. Long before beds, before homes with rooms, before walls and roofs, there were people, just people, wrapped in furs or leaves, curled into hollows, pressed against each other like puzzle pieces, their breath rising in pale clouds beneath a sky full of stars and mystery. We don't know their names. We don't know their thoughts. But we do know this: they slept, and it probably wasn't very comfortable. These were our Paleolithic ancestors, early humans and hominins, who, somewhere between surviving the hunt and fleeing predators, had to sleep. Not because it was a luxury, but because sleep is a biological need that even the wildest world cannot erase. There were no bedrooms, no pillows, just dirt, ash, maybe a bit of fur, and, if they were lucky, a warm shoulder. Where the ground was the bed, imagine a small group of hunter-gatherers tucked deep inside a rock shelter, far from the wind. Their backs are pressed to the cave wall, their feet toward a fire. A pile of leaves or animal hides softens the earth beneath them. They sleep in a cluster-shared body heat, not for light, not for ambience, but to keep the beasts away. They sleep in cycles, lightly, never fully years, twitching at every rustle in the brush. Their eyes crack open at distant howls. One of them stays awake as a watch. Then another takes over, a rotation of rest. Because in the wild, you never really sleep. You just drift in and out of danger. This was the first bedroom, not a room, not even a home, just a warm patch near a flame where, for a few hours, the world didn't need you to run or fight or gather. The smell of smoke and hairily human sleep probably didn't happen alone. Anthropologists believe these groups, ranging from 10 to 30 people, often slept in close, communal heaps. Picture it, the scent of smoked meat from dinner still lingering in the air, the smell of sweat, leather, fur, and wet earth breathing, lots of it, rhythmic, uneven, shared. There is something primal about group sleep. It calms the nervous system, reduces anxiety. Babies sleep better near other people. So did early humans. Even today, some people can't rest without the sound of another breathing in the room. We call it co-sleeping now, but back then it was just survival. Who slept where? The quiet politics of the ground even in these ancient clusters. Position mattered. Elders might sleep closer to the fire, less agile, more fragile. Warriors or stronger adults guarded the perimeter. Children slept sandwiched between adults, warmed. Pregnant women and nursing mothers were given the softest furs. There were no bedrooms, but already the hierarchy of sleep was forming. Where you lay down said something about who you were, even if no one said it aloud. Dreams in a language we'll never know, will never truly understand how early humans dreamed. But we do know from cave art and archaeological remains that spirituality and the night were linked. Caves with sleeping areas often included symbols or paintings of animals, stars, and unknown rituals. Burial positions mimic fetal sleep, curled, peaceful, intentional. Some scholars believe dreams were seen as messages from spirits, ancestors, or the world itself. To sleep was not just to rest, it was to enter a different realm, a sacred space, a soft border between the known and the unknowable. The fire crackles, a child whimpers in her sleep. A shaman mutters a chant to keep the bad dreams away. The night holds its breath. The first mattresses, a pile of hope, the earliest. Beds were not beds at all, but mats, piles, and nests made from twigs and leaves, dried grass, or reed skins of hunted animals. Moss, if you could find, if the ground was cold and unforgiving. But if you knew how to layer materials, you could create insulation. Archaeological digs in South Africa unearthed 77,000-year-old bedding, compressed layers of sedge and grass, laid atop ash to keep insects away. That's right, even prehistoric people knew how annoying bugs were, and ash, it didn't just warm you, it repelled fleas. Smart. So smart, no nightstand, just the skyly humans didn't have clocks. but they understood rhythm. The moon waxed and waned. The stars shifted. Owls hooted. Wolves howled. The night was alive, and sleep was part of its music. There was no bedtime routine, no brushing of teeth, no final scroll through glowing screens. There was only this. Darkness fell. The fire dimmed, and one by one they curled inward. They slept beneath galaxies with no name, under skies unspoiled by city lights, under the same moon we see now, that it looked fuller then, hung lower, perhaps even kinder. Fear was the blanket, let's not romanticize it. Sleeping was dangerous. Predators stalked the edges of the light. Snakes slithered through open caves. Fires went out. Storms rolled in. Other tribes raided. So why risk it? Because sleep was stronger than fear. Because every creature sleeps, even the brave, even the watchful, even the wounded. The question was never should we sleep, but where can we do it without dying? When they awoke, waking up wasn't with an alarm or a songbird. It was a grunt, a shove, or the smell of morning meat cooking. The fire had died. The sun cut through the cracks in stone. A new day, one more chance to chase, build, and simply not perish. Some carried their bedding if it could be carried. Some left it behind to rot into the dirt and be remade by the next group to pass through. It was sleep without nostalgia, rest without a mattress tag, just the need to recover and the hope to try again tomorrow. Why this still matters? Why does this old, quiet history matter? Because the first people to sleep on dirt floors are still in us. Because no matter how smart our mattresses get, we are still animals who sleep in the dark. Because when you curl up in bed tonight, beneath a roof, beside a lamp, atop engineered layers of memory foam, you're part of the same story. A long, beautiful, awkward story of tired people blinking at stars and daring to dream in the cold. You're lying in a cave. There's no mattress, no blanket, no silence. Your pillow, a rock warmed by fire, if you're lucky. Your bed, a lumpy pile of dry leaves, maybe softened by the skin of a deer whose bones still sit in the corner. The year is somewhere around 30,000 BCE, but you don't know that. All you know is the wind is cold. Your joints are stiff, and the crackling fire is the only thing standing between you and the many-toothed things out there. This is sleep before comfort, sleep before expectation, sleep as survival. Stone pillows. Why, though? Yes, prehistoric humans sometimes used stones as pillows. Archaeological digs, including in Africa and parts of Asia, reveal smoothed rocks deliberately placed beneath heads or necks. Why? Theories include elevation, raising the head to ease breathing or avoid insects; posture, preventing full side rotation during sleep, which could limit body exposure to cold or predators; symbolic protection. Some early societies believed elevating the head helped the spirit stay in the body during sleep. Still, if you're imagining a smooth river rock under your cheek, you're being too generous. These were hard, cold, often sharp, dash-edged. The discomfort wasn't a bug, it was a feature. You weren't supposed to sleep too deeply. You weren't supposed to forget the world was dangerous. Animal skins, the first blankets and mattresses now. Enter the animal skin, a hunted creature, perhaps a deer, a bear, or a mammoth provided food, tools, and most importantly, warmth. The hide was stretched, scraped clean, dried, or smoked, then laid out over leaves, reeds, or soil to create primitive bedding. These skins became ground barriers, keeping the cold earth away from human bodies. Wrap-around covers, precursors to blankets, social indicators to who had the biggest pelt, the softest. Even today, some tribal and nomadic communities around the world still sleep on cured hide sand, not just for tradition. They're warm, natural, durable, and incredibly resistant to moisture, lice, mites, and the joy of itching in his. Talk about something itchy in the prehistoric world, no matter how many hides you collected. One problem followed everyone into sleep: bugs, fleas, mites, lice, all thriving in the folds of fur, the seams of leather, and the unwashed creases of human skin. Evidence from early burial sites suggests people suffered from constant skin irritations. Combs, made from bone, were among the earliest grooming tools. Bedding was occasionally burned or replaced once too infested. Some clever groups even used ashes or aromatic herbs under their sleeping skins to drive away pests. Lavender, pine, cedar, yes, even thousands of years ago. We were trying to make bedtime smell nicer. Cold bones, hot stones, say winter has arrived. The air bites, your breath fogs, even inside your shelter. You can't sleep with your back to the wind, and the fire keeps dying down. So, you get creative. Heated stones, placed beneath animal hides, offered radiant warmth all night long. Stones were rotated from fire to bedding space, like prehistoric hot water bottles. In some regions, holes were dug into the ground, filled with embers, then covered in dirt and furs to create warm sleep pits. Innovation didn't wait for the Iron Age, was already crackling in these small acts of survival. Sleeping with your tools, and maybe your bones. Prehistoric people didn't leave valuables lying around. That included tools, weapons, charms, and bones from loved ones. That's right, some early graves indicate people slept near ancestral remains or carried small bones as protective tokens. You might have a flint blade under your hide, a carved ivory amulet around your neck, a polished bone of your mother tied to your belt, her presence guarding your dreams. We can't say exactly what they believed, but the way they slept with objects close, with heads on sacred stones, shows that night was never just physical. It was spiritual, symbolic, and deeply emotional. The constant fear of fire going out. The fire was your bedpost lamp, your heater, your security system. Keeping it alive meant everything. So, sleep was broken. One person watched the flames. Another would nudge glowing coals toward a new log. A child might wake crying in the cold, only to be hushed back to sleep by a mother's whisper and the sudden bloom of fire. In some areas, charred logs from long-gone fires have been found buried alongside primitive bedding, proof that people tended not just to warmth, but to the memory of it. Prehistoric naps and the daytime dozedn't think they only slept at night. Evidence suggests early humans slept intermittently, took naps around the fire, dozed while others worked or stood guard. Unlike today's rigid 7 to 9 hour block sleep, prehistoric people followed natural light rhythms. They dozed during storms, slept in the midday heat, woke often during the night, and it turns out they were probably healthier for it. Modern scientists now believe intermittent sleep may be closer to our natural rhythm than our current schedule. Group sleep equals group bond. One fascinating idea. Prehistoric group sleeping might have been the earliest form of emotional therapy, lying beside one another, breathing together, sharing warmth, listening to soft conversations in the dark. This created trust, cohesion, and attachment. Today, we have sleepovers, family beds, and cuddle therapy. They had the same thing, just with fewer pajamas. When sleep was a ceremony, while we tend to collapse into bed as the last act of a busy day. Prehistoric sleep may have been more ceremonial than we think. Some sites show animal bones arranged in specific shapes near bedding, charcoal circles, or patterns around the sleep area, burial mounds shaped like crescent moons, or eye symbols of dreaming. Perhaps they hummed, perhaps they prayed, perhaps they sang lullabies to the trees. Whatever they did, sleep was not taken for granted. It was a moment of vulnerability, surrender, and in that surrender, people reached not just for comfort, but for meaning. And then morning came when the sun rose, when the frost lifted from the leaves, when the fire turned to smoke and ash. They stirred a long stretch, a grunt, a cold sip of water, and then life began again. Another day to survive, to hunt, to carry dreams they couldn't explain but couldn't forget either. The next time you grumble about your lumpy pillow, or forget to charge your electric blanket, pause and imagine a child 30,000 years ago, sleeping beneath the ribs of a mammoth, wrapped in its skin, watching sparks fly from a dying fire. Her pillow is stone, her floor is earth, and still she sleeps, and she dreams. A sky for a ceiling, no roof, no walls, no insulation, just wind, stars, and the vast silence of a world untouched by fences for thousands of years. People were not settlers, they were movers, wanderers, herders, hunters, traders. Entire cultures lived and thrived without permanent structures, choosing instead to sleep where the land allowed and move on when the season changed or the water ran dry. For them, sleep wasn't anchored to a bedroom. It happened wherever the fire was lit, wherever the animals grazed, wherever the earth welcomed them for the night. Their bedroom, the world itself, camp life, sleeping in a circle in nomadic communities across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. Camps were arranged in thoughtful circles. Tents or lean-tos formed a ring, with children and elders sleeping at the center. Herd animals nearby, warriors and adults forming the outer rim. This wasn't just logistics, it was protection, a kind of human shield. By sleeping in this formation, groups stayed warm and safe, facing outward, ready to defend, but always connected. Sleep was a shared event, not a private one. No walls, just watchfulness sleeping under open skies. Sounds romantic, but it came with a cost. Vigilance. With no doors to lock or walls to lean against, nomadic groups developed a system of night watch. One person always stayed awake, rotating every few hours. They listened for predators, rival tribes, changes in wind, or the crack of a branch. Even the lightest sleep was full of awareness. People trained themselves to wake at the sound of a camel's grunt or a sheep's distress cry, and still they managed to dream sleeping. With the herd among pastoral nomads like the Mongols, Bedouins, and Maasai, the animals were family, lifelines. and bedtime companions. Goats and sheep slept at the edges of the camp. Camels and horses, more valuable, were tethered close to sleeping quarters. Animal warmth became a literal blanket, especially in colder regions. To sleep was to sleep with the herd, listening to soft bleats, shifting hooves, and warm animal breath. These sounds became lullabies, and if an animal stirred violently in the night, you woke up because it meant something else was watching. Tents and yurts, mobile bedrooms, though many. Nomads slept under the open sky. Others built portable sleeping shelters, ingenious structures, like yurts, Central Asia, insulated with felt and wood lattice. North American plains, cone-shaped hide tents, warm, wind-resistant, and quick to pack. Goter tents, Bedouin tribes, woven from dark wool. They were waterproof, breathable, and beautifully shaded. Inside these tents, beds were nothing more than folded rugs, straw mats, or furs. People slept low to the ground, side by side. Children curled into parents, sometimes wrapped in the same cloth. No separation, no privacy, but plenty of closeness. Sleep as ritual nomadic life meant moving often, but rituals traveled too, across cultures. Sleep was preceded by storytelling, oral histories, parables, legends whispered by firelight, prayers, or chants to protect the soul during sleep. Oil lamps or small fires kept burning not just for warmth, but to ward off spirits. Sleep was not just functional, it was spiritual, a surrender into the night. One Mongolian folktale claimed the stars were eyes of ancestors, watching kindly as their children rested. In some nomadic African cultures, dreams were considered messages from the spirit world, and the placement of the body during sleep, especially the direction it faced, was vital. Winds, sand, and the problem of comfort. Nomads faced natural challenges every night. Blistering wind in the steppe, drifting sand in the desert, hard, frozen ground in the tundra. So they adapted. Beds were layered with wool, felt, or bundled grass. In the desert, some buried heated stones beneath mats to stay warm. In frigid regions, families would huddle under a single, enormous pelt, with only one side facing the cold. No luxury, but lots of ingenuity. Segmented sleep, waking in the middle. Historical records show many nomadic cultures practiced segmented sleep. A first sleep after sundown, a wakeful hour or two in the middle of the night, used for tending fire, speaking softly, praying, or even quiet companionship. Then a second sleep till dawn. This pattern, once thought strange, may actually be more natural for human biology than the modern 8-hour block. And in these quiet night hours, under wide-open skies, people often reported their most vivid dreams. Dreams that traveled. Nomads didn't just carry tents. They carried dreams and stories of dreams. Among Bedouins, a dream about water could mean a journey of hardship but reward. In the Mongolian steppes, dreaming of a white horse meant a shift in fortune. In Siberia, shamans interpreted dreams beside sleeping fires, using drums to call forth the dream spirits again. Sleep was personal and communal. One person's nightmare became a tribe's warning. One woman's dream of an eagle might lead the entire group to change direction the next morning. The beauty of the skybed there is something deeply humbling about sleeping outside, exposed to the stars. It reminds you that your roof is made of constellations, that your ancestors once stared at these same stars, that sleep does not need a mattress to be meaningful. Even today, people in many nomadic or semi-nomadic cultures choose to sleep outside their tents on warm nights, wrapped in rugs, listening to the silence, because sometimes the best ceiling is no ceiling at all. When the sun rose, waking up wasn't soft, it was bright, sudden, demanding. Camels stirred and grumbled, ashes blew across sand, elders whispered the morning prayer, blankets were folded, packs reassembled. The earth swept clean of tracks if they had never been there, but every sleeper carried their dreams with them, folded into satchels, tucked beneath shawls, waiting for the next place to rest their heads. Final thought: to sleep beneath stars is to remember your place in the world. Small, brief, beautiful, nomadic sleepers didn't have bedrooms, but they had stories, they had skies, they had each other, and somehow, under wind and silence, they found rest not in comfort, but in belonging to the night. Imagine laying down for the night on a carved wooden frame, your head resting on a crescent-shaped headrest, your body wrapped in fine linen, incense still hanging in the air from evening offerings. You're not royalty, just a well-off scribe, perhaps. But in Egypt, sleep was not simply for rest, it was a brush with the divine. Sleep was sacred, sleep was symbolic, sleep was preparation for eternity. Unlike prehistoric cave sleepers or wandering nomads, the Egyptians made intentional spaces for slumber, structured, ritualistic, and layered in meaning. And strangely enough, their obsession with sleep had more to do with death than dreams. The afterlife bed was the first bed. The ancient Egyptians were the first people in history to design beds as objects of beauty and spiritual power. But they weren't invented for the living at first. They were for the dead. Tombs from as early as 3000 BCE contain elegant wooden bed frames placed inside burial chambers. The body, mummified and wrapped in linen, was laid on the bed with care. Offerings, dates, wine, oils, and amulets were placed nearby. This wasn't about comfort. It was about preparing the soul for its eternal rest. In Egyptian culture, sleep and death were closely linked. The god Osiris, ruler of the afterlife, was often shown lying on a funerary bed. Even the word for sleep, sanat, had overlapping meanings, with death and dreaming. So, yes, Egyptians invented beds, but not to fall asleep, to rise again. The strange beauty of wooden bed from some of the oldest surviving beds in the world were found in ancient Egypt. These weren't crude slabs. They were carefully crafted wooden structures, slightly curved to cradle the spine, elevated on legs to keep sleepers away from insects and moisture. The legs were often shaped like animal Poslean feet, gazelle hooves, bull legs, symbolizing protection and strength. Royal beds included gilded frames, decorated with ivory or lapis lazuli, footboards, carved with protective symbols, magical inscriptions meant to ward off nightmares. Even Pharaoh Tutankhamun, who died young, was buried with multiple beds, each more elaborate than the last, because sleeping well in the afterlife mattered more than in life. The headrest, pillow, or punishment. Now, about that pillow. You won't find anything fluffy. Egyptians used headrests, typically made of wood, stone, and ivory. These were small, curved platforms supported by a vertical base designed to elevate the neck, not cushion it. Cushion it. Why? Keeping the head raised prevented insects from crawling into ears, mouth, or nose. It preserved elaborate hairstyles and oils worn by men and women alike. Most importantly, the head was believed to be the seat of the soul. Elevating it protected the soul's exit and return during sleep. To our modern sensibilities, it sounds awful. But to them, it was safety, spirituality, and status. Linen sheets and scented sleep. Egyptian bedding was usually made of linen woven from flax, soft and breathable in the intense desert heat. If you were wealthy, your bedding might be dyed with plant colors, perfumed with oils and incense, layered with extra folds to indicate prestige before sleep. Women and men alike anointed their bodies with fragrant balms, sweet myrrh, lotus oil, frankincense. The scent of sleep was holy. Poorer Egyptians, however, slept on red mats, directly on the floor, or on simple wooden platforms with no headrests. But even they burned herbs at night to keep mosquitoes away, and considered sleep a time of spiritual importance. Dreams as divine dispatches. To sleep in Egypt was to enter a doorway to the gods. Dreams weren't random. They were messages, prophecies, instructions. In fact, pharaohs consulted priests after dreams for divine interpretation. Temples had special dream chambers where people slept, hoping to receive healing visions. Scribes recorded dreams in scrolls, noting patterns, warnings, and auspicious signs. The Ramesside Dream Book, c. 1200 BCE, categorized over 200 dreams, and what they meant, everything from dreaming of fish, a good omen, to falling, a sign of danger. Sleep wasn't downtime. It was cosmic communication. Sacred sleep spaces in temples inside major temples like those of Karnak and Luxor. There were special sleeping areas known as incubation chambers, healing halls, silent sanctuaries. People made pilgrimages just to sleep. They're hoping the gods would visit them in dreams, offering cures for illness, visions of the future, blessings for fertility. This wasn't superstition, it was spiritual medicine. Sleep was part of healing, part of faith, part of the rhythm of life itself. Naps under the sun, while the elite had formal beds and structured nighttime rituals. Most Egyptians, especially workers and farmers, relied on short, essential naps. During the scorching daytime hours, shade was found under date palms, beside stone walls, or near riverbanks. Bodies sprawled on cool stone. A folded tunic became a pillow. They didn't sleep for comfort, but for survival, and the Nile's quiet lull carried them briefly into a lighter kind of rest. Sleep for the poor, reed, dust, and dreams for commoners. Sleep was simpler, but no less symbolic. Most workers slept in one room, homes with dirt floors, mats of papyrus or palm leaves, close quarters with family and animals. Yet even here, people anointed themselves with protective oils. They whispered prayers. They believed that dreams mattered, and if someone had a troubling dream, the next morning it might be shared with the village, debated like news from the gods. Sleep was sacred, even to those who had no bed. When night came to Egypt as the sun set, temple horns would sound across cities. Fires were lit. Cool breezes carried the smell of cooked grains and perfumed hair. Children curled beside mothers. Priests lay their heads on sacred stone. Pharaohs reclined on golden frames carved with spells, and somewhere, by the riverbank, a farmer wrapped himself in a worn linen cloth, listening to the croak of frogs and the breath of the Nile. Another night, another dream, another chance to hear the whispers of eternity. The Egyptians saw sleep, not as escape it, as connection to gods, to ancestors, to their next life in their world. Beds were thrones, pillows were sacred, and sleep was not the end of the day. Their unmatched military discipline, their brutal training of children, and their obsession with toughness. But beneath their bronzed armor and war cries, there was still one undeniable human truth. They had to sleep. But in Sparta, even sleep was an act of endurance. No fluff, no softness, no frills. If you were a Spartan, your sleep wasn't meant to restore it, was meant to harden, training the body to sleep on wood. Spartan boys, starting as young as 7, were removed from their homes and thrown into the Agoge, the rigorous military education system designed to build unbreakable soldiers and sleep. It was part of the training. Boys were given no beds. They were forced to sleep on wooden floors or piles of reeds. They had to gather themselves bare. Even in winter, no blankets were provided. They were encouraged to steal bedding if they wanted warmth, as a test of stealth and skill. If caught, they were beaten not for stealing, but for getting caught. The message was clear: comfort is weakness. The cold discipline of Spartan nights, Spartan barracks, were not cozy places. Soldiers slept shoulder to shoulder, under open roofs or inside stone structures. Fire was minimal, cold-built character. Nighttime discipline was as strict as the daytime drills. Talking after dark was forbidden. Rolling over noisily, punishable. Displaying fear of the cold or discomfort, dishonorable. Even in deep fatigue, they had to lie still, controlled, silent, and ready to fight at a moment's notice. The idea wasn't just physical resilience, it was mental supremacy. A Spartan must conquer even sleep. Beds for the dead, not the living. While many civilizations created ornate beds for comfort or prestige, Spartans rejected luxury. Elaborate beds were seen as symbols of moral decay. In fact, in most Spartan homes, sleeping furniture was minimal or non-existent. Citizens who added cushions or layers to their sleeping area could be mocked or publicly shamed. Spartans believed softness made you soft, and softness made you weak. Interestingly, archaeological finds from neighboring Greek city-states show beds made of metal, wood, and bronze, but in Sparta, barely any. Spartans left beds for the Athenians, war-torn sleep, resting on the battlefield. Not training or policing their own citizens, Spartans were at war. On campaign, Spartan warriors slept in formation, with spears by their side in the open, using their cloaks as bedding and covers on the bare earth. Under olive trees or beside campfires too small to keep anyone truly warm. There are records of entire platoons sleeping in shifts, with some standing guard, while others stole a few hours of rest. And when danger loomed, they slept fully dressed, boots on, weapons gripped, ready to rise and fight mid-dream. The Spartan cloak, blanket, bed, and burial cloth. Each Spartan carried a red chlamys, a heavy woolen cloak worn during the day and used as bedding at night. It acted as a mattress and a blanket. It kept the body warm in both mountains and rain, and for many, it was also their shroud. the same cloth used to cover their body in death. Spartans didn't fear dying in sleep. They feared dying without being ready. Sleep, pain, and silence singered in battle. Good luck sleeping it off. Wounded Spartans were not pampered, had to sleep through pain without complaint, received only herbal poultices or tightly wrapped linen applied swiftly. Without sympathy, their suffering was often taken as a test of soul. To moan in the night was to disgrace your name, to sleep even while bleeding without a word. Heroic. When sleep was a weapon, the true power of Spartan sleep was that it became a kind of psychological warfare to enemies. The idea that Spartans could sleep soundly before a doomed battle, sleep without protection, even behind enemy lines, or not sleep at all for days and still charge with ferocity. It was terrifying. Their sleep discipline suggested something inhuman, and in war, fear was as valuable as a spear. Children's sleep as military training. Even Spartan infants were trained early in sleeplessness. Babies were laid on cold stones instead of blankets to toughen their skin. Parents were encouraged to let them cry to weed out the weak. If an infant showed signs of constant fatigue or illness, they might be left to die, as Spartan law demanded only the strongest survive. This brutal ideology reached into every corner of daily life. Even bedtime was shaped by national duty. Dreams, not welcome here. There's little evidence that Spartans cared for dreams the way Egyptians or Babylonians did. In fact, dreams were often seen as distractions, a potential sign of weakness or indulgence. While other Greeks used dreams for prophecy, the Spartans were more likely to dismiss them, believing that what mattered happened while you were awake. But a few sources suggest that elite warriors occasionally reported battle dreams of fighting, victory, or glorious death. And if you dreamed of dying for Sparta, that was seen not as fear, but as loyalty in your bones. The Spartan wife's bed. Though less is written about Spartan women's sleep, we know they were powerful, educated, and also conditioned to endure. Spartan women slept on similar mats or firm bedding. They exercised daily even while pregnant and were expected to bear strong children. Their homes were not decorated with softness or excess. To be Spartan was to sleep like a soldier, regardless of gender. Waking in Sparta at dawn, horns would sound, no snooze button, no warm-up. Spartans would rise, fold their cloaks, sharpen weapons, wash in cold water, and begin training before the sun had warmed the stones. Sleep was not escape. It was brief preparation for another day of war, law, and hardship. Final thought. While we cradle memory foam pillows and whisper into lavender-scented darkness, it's worth remembering not all sleep was soft in Sparta. Sleep was a test, a cold ritual, a moment to prove your spirit could conquer your body. They didn't sleep to rest, they slept to fight again, from dirt floors to dream rooms. Let's start with a contrast. In Sparta, sleep was punishment. In Persia, it was pleasure. While many ancient cultures treated rest as a necessity, the Persians, particularly during the Achaemenid Empire, 550 to 330 BCE, made sleep an art form. With wealth pouring in from across the empire, stretching from Greece to India, Persian kings and nobles built palaces where nighttime was a sacred, luxurious escape. Here, sleep didn't just happen, it was staged. The royal bedchamber, a sanctuary of softness, The Persians were among the first to dedicate entire rooms solely for sleep. These weren't just functional, they were designed for aesthetic peace: arches, columns, carved cedar ceilings, aromatic, calm incense burners glowing through the night, and softness, animal hides, layered linens, embroidered throws. In royal chambers, one could find beds raised on platforms, draped in sheer fabrics that floated in the breeze, velvet cushions and early feather-stuffed pillows, walls painted with stars or adorned with silken tapestry, turning sleep into a theatrical experience. Persians slept not out of necessity, but out of deliberate comfort. The pillow revolution. Now let's talk about one of the greatest inventions in the history of sleep. The pillow. Persia is among the first known civilizations to popularize the soft cushion as a sleep object. Unlike the stone or wood headrests of Egypt and China, Persians introduced cloth-wrapped bolsters, feather or cotton-stuffed cushion, silk covers embroidered with gold threaded. These weren't just for the head, they were everywhere. Beneath the arms, around the back, piled on either side. A Persian noble's bed might resemble a giant bird's nest of softness, surrounded by lamps, perfumes, and food trays. Sleep was no longer minimalistic, it was decadent. Group sleep and the first sleepover culture. Persians didn't sleep alone. Unlike the solitary bedrooms of later Western tradition, Persian noble homes and even some middle-class ones often included large sleeping chambers for entire families or guests. It was common for multiple women or men to sleep in the same space, guests to be offered cushioned bedding on the floor, not as second-class treatment, but as a gesture of warmth. Late-night feasts, poetry, and music to bleed into sleep time, like the world's earliest sleepovers. It was in these chambers that hospitality met sleep-hand. Both were considered sacred. The perfume of night in the Persian Empire. One did not go to bed before sleep. Rosewater or jasmine oil was applied to the temples. Bedding was sprinkled with saffron water or lined with cedar chips. Some rooms had perfumed braziers, incense burners designed to fill the air with calming fragrance. Smell was deeply spiritual. A sweet-scented bed was believed to soothe the soul, invite good dreams, and honor the gods. It wasn't just sensory pleasure, it was ritual purification. Dreams as diplomacy, unlike Spartans, who ignored dreams, or Egyptians, who revered them as prophecies. Persians often treated dreams with a mix of curiosity and political suspicion. Historical texts, such as those referenced by Herodotus, tell of Persian kings consulting magi Zoroastrian priests to interpret royal dreams, suspecting plots if they dreamed of betrayal or death, making policy decisions based on vivid night visions. One famous example, greater than King Darius reportedly dreamed of a sea of blood engulfing his empire before a key battle and took it as a warning to delay his campaign. Dreams weren't just personal, they were imperial intelligence. The servants who watched you sleep in royal palaces, Persian kings often slept with guardians or attendants seated near their bedchambersy to protect them from assassins, to adjust incense or lamps, to awaken them gently with poetry or harp music at dawn. Yes, Persian kings had custom wake-up songs. They didn't wake to alarm clocks or trumpets but to soft human voices saying, "My king, the sky has opened." The stars have stepped back for you. Rise. Let that replace your morning phone alarm sometime. Mathematics of sleep. The three-part cycle. Persian scholars, particularly those influenced by Zoroastrian philosophy, believed in a three-part night. 1. The first sleep, just after sundown, body recovery. 2. The dreaming hour, near midnight, divine or subconscious communication. 3. The morning transition, where prayer and waking rituals helped the soul return fully. This segmentation echoes patterns also seen in medieval Europe and early Islamic philosophy, suggesting Persia may have helped shape global thinking about sleep structure. Zoroastrianism and the moral role of sleep. Zoroastrian beliefs, which dominated the Persian Empire, saw sleep as a spiritual trial. While asleep, your soul left your body. It was vulnerable to evil spirits, devas, which is why protective rituals like prayers or incense were essential. Dreaming of darkness or fire could indicate a soul in imbalance. Therefore, to sleep well was not just restful, it was moral. A good sleeper was a good soul. A restless sleeper had spiritual work to do. The Persian nap, yes. They had one. Persians appreciated midday rest, especially during hot summers, known as Namaz Zohar. A quiet period was often observed after the noon meal, where people would recline on shaded terraces or inner courtyards, nap with perfumed scarves draped over their faces. Be gently awakened with sweet drinks like rose syrup and chilled water. This wasn't laziness, it was considered civility. A life lived too fast, too roughly, without pause, was considered barbaric. When morning came in Persia, the Persian morning was a deliberate symphony. Silk curtains, drawn aside by attendants. Lamps, extinguished one by one. Wash basins filled with rosewater for the first cleanse. Gentle poetry read aloud to the waking family, often from the Avesta or from pre-Zoroastrian hymns. Even waking was an act of elegance, and if the dream was good, it was whispered, recorded, and maybe sent to the court for interpretation. Final thought in Persia. Sleep was neither primitive nor harsh. It was structured softness, a reminder that rest could be both beautiful and meaningful. They didn't reject sleep like the Spartans. They didn't fear it like the warriors. They invited it in, dressed it in silk, perfumed it, and gave it a throne of its own. Sleep in the Persian Empire was not just recovery, it was a gift of grace. The harmony of sleep and nature. In ancient China, everything was built around balance of elements, of time, of body and spirit. Sleep was no different, rooted in Taoist, Confucian, and Buddhist thought. Sleep was considered a sacred process, part of your alignment with the natural world. You didn't just fall asleep, you flowed into rest, following the energy of the universe. Where the Greeks fought sleep and the Spartans denied it, the Chinese cultivated it like a garden. Beds of wood, silk, and bamboo, like the hard floors of nomadic camps or Spartan barracks. Chinese sleepers enjoyed elevated beds centuries before Europe embraced them. These beds were built of cedar, bamboo, or lacquered wood, often placed near windows or along north-facing walls to align with feng shui principles, draped with silk canopies or mosquito netting, not just for comfort, but for spiritual separation from the waking world. In wealthier homes, a bed might resemble a small room enclosed on three sides, decorated with carvings of lotus, cranes, or dragons, with tiny built-in shelves for scrolls, incense, or tea. It wasn't just where you slept, it was where you dreamed, meditated, and even received guests in the morning. The summer secret, bamboo Matsunachin. China pioneered seasonal sleep technology, especially through the invention of the bamboo mat, called Zhulu Jusi. In summer, thick bedding was replaced with cool, woven bamboo sheets. These were laid on top of wooden beds or stone platforms to lower body temperature. Some mats were even soaked in herbal infusions before sleep to reduce inflammation. This was thousands of years before memory foam or AC. Innovation wasn't luxury, it was survival. Pillows for your brain. And here's something fascinating. Chinese pillows weren't just for your head, they were for your spirit. Ceramic or wooden pillows were often used instead of soft ones. These hard pillows were hollow and filled with scented herbs, etched with mantras, zodiac signs, or moral lessons, designed to keep your spine straight and align the ki while you sleep. Some even had slots for dream scrolls paper, where you'd write or draw your dreams in the morning to track patterns over time. Yes, you could say these were the earliest sleep journals, built into the pillow itself. Dreaming as a diagnostic tool in traditional Chinese medicine, TCM. Dreams were more than nonsense. They were diagnostic clues. For example, dreams of flying might indicate a deficiency in the heart's yin. Dreams of fire or anger could mean excessive liver yang. Repetitive nightmares pointed to digestive or spleen imbalance. Physicians asked about dreams the way modern doctors ask about sleep cycles or diet. A patient's emotional and physical health was mapped through their sleep narrative. Nocturnal rest became part of your treatment plan. Confucian bedtime and ethical sleep. Confucianism taught that a well-ordered life required rising early, sleeping on time, and never indulging in excess. Even your sleep habits reflected your moral standing. Children were taught to fold their bedding neatly after waking, never lounge in bed past dawn, avoid gossip or negative thinking before rest so their mind stayed clean through the night. A disordered sleeper was seen as undisciplined, even suspicious. Your bed, in Confucian households, was as sacred as your school scrolls. Zhou Dynasty sleep rituals, 1046 to 256 BCE, in the Zhou Dynasty noble households, followed a highly rich sleep routine, such as 1. Bathing with aromatic herbs like chrysanthemum or ginseng. 2. Drinking warm lotus root soup or juju pea. 3. Brushing teeth with salt and pine ash. 4. Sitting in meditation for 9 breaths to clear the mind. 5. Offering incense to Zhaojun, the kitchen god, to ensure domestic peace through the night. Then and only then could you climb into your carved bed and surrender to the spirit world. Ghosts, dreams, and night visitors. Ancient Chinese belief held that sleep was a departure. The soul left the body each night to wander the heavens, consult ancestors, or witness future events. But not all visitors were welcome. Dream demons, Mengui, were said to enter through open windows. Restless spirits could tangle your key if your bed faced the wrong direction. Children were protected with paper talismans tied to bedposts. Wind chimes and jade charms were hung over pillows to block nightmares. A bad sleep wasn't just a rough night. It could mean spiritual attack. Beds as status symbols by the Han and Tang dynasties. Chinese beds were more than furniture, they were status markers. a high-ranking official might sleep on a platform bed with embedded stone cooling slabs, surrounded by a lacquered privacy screen, hand-painted with cranes, mountains, or verses from the Tao Te Ching, flanked by small tea cabinets, bookshelves, and water bowls for foot washing. Sleep was an experience, and the bedroom became a place of philosophical and poetic contemplation. A peasant might have just a mat and a jug of water, but a scholar, he slept like he lived, with art and discipline. The tea before sleep-warm beverages were essential to Chinese sleep hygiene. The most common nighttime drinks included chrysanthemum tea, cooling and calming; lotus seed soup, thought to soothe anxiety; fermented barley broth, to ease digestion; and for those suffering insomnia, a blend of jujube, licorice root, and Chinese date boiled gently and served in porcelain cups. No melatonin needed. The gentle wake-up in elite homes. Waking was just as sacred as sleeping. No one shouted. Children were gently tapped on the shoulder, or called by soft name. Windows were unshuttered slowly, so light would ease the soul back into the body. The moment between sleep and wake was considered a spiritual threshold. To cross it too quickly could disrupt the mind's natural harmony. A respectful wake-up was a sign of cultural refinement. Final thought in ancient China: sleep wasn't a surrender, it was a ceremony. Everything had meaning: the position of your bed, the type of tea before bed, the fragrance in your bedding, the way your dreams shaped. Honored it and listened closely to what it had to say. Because in China, rest was not weakness, it was wisdom under silk. In Latin, there's a beautiful word, oshatha, art of unhurried rest. Romans, especially the elite, believed that rest wasn't laziness, it was civilized, a reflection of wealth, status, and intellect. Unlike cultures that treated sleep as utility or punishment, Romans made rest fashionable. And it wasn't just about nighttime. The Romans had afternoon naps, bathhouse, lounge sessions, countryside retreats, called villa otiosa, literally houses. To rest well was to live well. To nap was to declare, I control my time. Roman beds, raised, draped, and decorative by the time of the Republic and Empire CE, 509 BCE to 476 CE. Roman beds called lecti were everywhere, in bedrooms, in banqueting halls, even in tombs. These weren't simple mats. The typical Roman bed included a wooden or bronze frame with tall legs, webbed or rope supports, soft cushions stuffed with wool, feathers, or straw, layered linens, sometimes dyed purple, the color of emperors. Some beds were so high they required stepping stools to climb onto. In wealthier homes, beds had carved headboards and inlaid ivory, curtains drawn around them for privacy and pomp, even built-in slaves, alcoves, so attendants could remain close. A bed wasn't just for sleep, was a symbol of Roman taste. Sleeping rooms, cubicula, and triclinium. The Roman home domus had specific rooms for sleeping called cubicula. These were small, windowless chambers off interior courtyards, built for darkness and quiet, decorated with frescoes often erotic, mythological, or pastoral to guide dreams. But Romans also slept and dined in tricliniums, or reclining rooms. Guests lounged on beds arranged in a U-shape, eating, chatting, napping, sometimes all at once. A nap mid-feast, perfectly acceptable for the elite. Sleep and socializing shared space. The midday nap. Meridiershire mans deeply valued the midday rest, called meridiatio. Life was structured around it. Markets closed, senators paused debates, slaves were allowed to nap, if briefly. This wasn't just for physical refreshment, it was strategic. A rested citizen could reason better, argue sharper, and love longer. The poet Martial even mocked people who skipped their nap, calling them enemies of the soul. To sleep in daylight was publicly endorsed. Imagine modern CEOs promoting daily naps. Romans would have thought we're insane for not doing it. Sleep after the bath. The Roman ritual. Romans had a strict sequence. 1. Work or study in the morning. 2. Long bath in the afternoon. Thermi, closing parenthesis 3. Light meal. 4. Nap in a cool, shaded room, ideally with a breeze, a slave fanning you, and a plate of grapes nearby. Thermi weren't just bathing complexes. They were libraries, exercise centers, nap lounges. Sleep after bathing was called postcoitum quies, the rest after the meal. It wasn't laziness, it was recovery, and highly recommended. Dreams, omens, and oracles. Romans took dreams seriously, but not always personally. To the average Roman, dreams could be omens or divine messages. Nightmares might be warnings from angry ancestors. Sexual dreams could reflect divine favor or suppressed desires. The Emperor Augustus famously consulted dream interpreters, and dream books circulated in the Forum. However, skeptics like Cicero dismissed it all as foolish murmurings of the brain. So while some Romans believed dreams shaped fate, others saw them as bedroom noise. Still, to dream of an eagle or lightning, you were probably headed for greatness or disaster. Rome's most tired, the poor and the sleepless wild. Elite Romans dozed on feather beds. The urban poor often slept in cramped, smoky rooms above shops, on straw or wooden planks, in shifts. Since many families shared one bed, some even slept on the street, wrapped in cloaks, surrounded by city dogs and echoing carts, using steps of temples or market stalls for shelter. For them, sleep wasn't OSHA, it was exhaustion. Soldiers, sleep, and watch rotations. Roman soldiers, legionnaires, were expected to function with minimal sleep in military camps. Sleeping quarters. Contubernia housed 8 soldiers. They rotated night watchers, often sleeping only 3 to 4 hours at a time. Beds were straw mats or leather cots. The Roman military believed in discipline over comfort, but they also had strict schedules, camp rituals to induce calm, even dream interpreters in some ranks to march 20 miles and still set up camp by dusk. You needed to nap when and where you could. Sleeping with the dead. Romans buried their dead with beds, pillows, and lamps. They believed the deceased continued sleeping in the afterlife and needed comfort in catacombs and tombs. Carved stone beds, lecti funebres, were common. Inscriptions often included dreamlike poetry, greater than rest, beloved one, and dream of golden fields. Sleep, for the Romans, was the final form of peace and worthy of honor, even in death. Sleeping with someone, or several in Rome, sleep was communal, erotic, and often political. Elite men might share their beds with lovers, slaves. These weren't always used for sleep, but they were proudly displayed. Bedroom privacy didn't exist. A bed was a stage for intimacy, alliances, or betrayal. And in villas, whole wings were devoted to sleep and pleasure. It wasn't called the bread and circuses empire for nothing. The rise of the siesta culture, though the empire fell, the Roman tradition of structured daytime rest spread across Europe and inspired the Mediterranean siesta culture. Spain, Italy, and even parts of North Africa inherited the idea that sleep wasn't shameful, didn't need to wait until night, and could be woven into daily life. So when your boss frowns at you for yawning at 2 p.m., remember Rome would have given you a daybed and grapes. Final thought, the Romans didn't just sleep to survive. They made it part of their social rhythm, their personal politics, and their aesthetic ambition. To them, rest was never wasted. It was the reward of empire, intellect, and indulgence. Because in ancient Rome, even the gods took naps. If you think people have always slept in one continuous stretch, think again. In medieval Europe, from the 9th to the 17th century, most people followed a natural, widespread routine of segmented sleep, or what historians now call biphasic sleep. Here's how it worked. First sleep, roughly from sunset, approximately 8 to 9 p.m., to midnight or 1 a.m., a quiet, wakeful period, often lasting 1 to 2 hours. Second, sleep, from around 2 or 3 a.m. to sunrise. This wasn't rare. It was universal, documented in monks' journals, medical texts, and literature across France, England, Italy, and beyond. But what did people actually do during that mysterious middle-of-a-night window? The wakeful watch. What people did between sleeps, that 1-2 hour period after the first sleep, was known simply as the watch. Psalms by candlelight, tended to livestock or stoked hearth fires, checked on family or helped soothe a crying baby, made love, yes. Fertility manuals actually recommended this exact timing, reflected on dreams, journaling them or discussing them with others, occasionally snuck out for mischief, midnight bread baking, or quiet conversations. This wasn't insomnia. It was expected, and even considered healthy. Sleeping conditions: cold, crowded, crude in medieval peasant homes. Sleep conditions were far from romantic. Most families slept in one room, often the only room in the house, shared one large bed, sometimes with parents, children, and even farm animals, used straw mattresses or simple wood platforms called bedstocks, covered themselves with woolen cloaks or coarse linen. There were no pillows unless you were rich, and bedding was rarely washed. The smell, let's say your dreams had to compete with the aroma of sweat, smoke, and sheep. The bedchamber of the wealthy, in contrast. Noble or royal bedrooms were sometimes entire suites, complete with massive 4-poster beds with velvet curtains for warmth and privacy, feather mattresses, embroidered pillows, and fur throws, personal chapels attached to bedrooms for mid-love-and-night prayer, servants stationed nearby to provide warm wine or reheat footstones. Even the word chamberlain refers to someone who managed the noble's sleeping chamber. For them, the middle of the night was not only spiritual, it was serene. Night as a spiritual gateway in this deeply Christian age. The wakeful watch was a sacred liminal space, a time when heaven and earth drew closer. Dreams carried messages from God. Prayers uttered between midnight and 3 a.m. were thought to be the most powerful. Monks, particularly Benedict, adhered to a rigid nighttime schedule, waking at 2 or 3 a.m. for matins, night prayers, closing parenthesis, chanting psalms in stone. Chapels by candlelight, returning to their cells for a second round of sleep until dawn. Sleep was interrupted on purpose as a spiritual discipline. Ghosts, demons, and the devil's hour, but not everything in the night was holy. The period between midnight and 3 a.m. was also feared as the devil's hour, a time when demons and restless spirits were believed to roam freely. People avoided looking into mirrors or lighting too many candles. It was considered unwise to wander, lest you encounter a hag, a witch, or a black dog. Even the way people lay in bed mattered. Sleeping on your back, a sign the devil might sit upon your chest. Many stories of night terrors and succubi originated from these segmented hours. Dreams, as divine or dangerous dreams, held dual meanings in the medieval mind. A dream after first sleep might be prophetic. A dream during second sleep might come from the devil. This belief shaped everything from dream interpretation to marriage advice. The church debated fiercely, were dreams messages from God, or were they distractions sent by Satan to tempt the weak? It wasn't just about what you dreamed, but when you dreamed it. Medieval doctors and sleep advice medical texts of the time, like those based on Galenic theory, offered specific sleep guidelines. Sleep on your right side first, then roll to your left. Don't eat a heavy meal before bed, it causes bad vapors. Too much sleep could lead to damp humors and sluggish thought. Not enough sleep could cause melancholy or madness. One popular remedy for poor sleep: a pillow filled with rosemary, lavender, and dried apple peels, not too different from what we buy on Etsy today. Sleep debt in the Castleven medieval nobility, with their feather beds and fire-warmed chambers, didn't always get full nights of sleep. Why? Feasts and tournaments often ran late into the night. Travel was grueling, requiring night rides. Even in winter, political intrigue meant assassins. Poisonings were nightly threats. Some kings were so paranoid they slept in decoy rooms or rotated beds each night. To sleep well in a castle was to be either extremely lucky or extremely powerful. Sleeping in inns and monasteries, you were a traveler. You likely stayed in inns, shared beds, no privacy, monasteries, simple straw bedding, structured night routines, wayfarers, barns, if you were broke, alongside livestock. Inns often required two strangers to share a bed, separated by a bolster. Privacy, none. Safety, debatable. But you did what you had to. Sleep was currency, and sometimes you paid in trust. The disappearance of segmented sleep. So, what happened? Why did we stop sleeping in two parts? Historians suggest several factors: the invention of artificial lighting, oil lamps, then gas, then electricity, closing parenthesis, the rise of the clock, and more rigid work schedules, urbanization, which discouraged nighttime wandering or activity, the Industrial Revolution, which demanded 8-hour shifts and created the modern idea of a solid 8 hours. By the late 1800s, first sleep and second sleep were largely forgotten, viewed as outdated or even dysfunctional. But our bodies remember modern echoes of the medieval watch 5, and today, many people wake up around 1 to 3 a.m., unable to fall back asleep. Doctors call it sleep maintenance insomnia, but some researchers believe it's not a disorder at all, just a biological echo of our medieval rhythm. Your body may still be trying to return to first sleep, a reflective, wakeful period. Second sleep, maybe. Your midnight thoughts aren't the problem, maybe. Maybe they're history tapping on your shoulder. Final thought, the medieval night wasn't quiet, it was alive. Between sleeps, people wrote letters, lit candles, whispered prayers, and sometimes just sat in the dark, listening to the wind. They didn't fear the pause in the middle. They used it because, in the Middle Ages, sleep wasn't a straight line. It was a rhythmic dance with darkness. Enter the king's bedroom, a stage in silk Versailles. Wasn't just a palace, it was a theater of control, and every room was a scene in a larger play. None more so than the bedchamber of the king. Louis XIV, the Sun King, designed his sleeping quarters as the emotional and political heart of France. In fact, he moved his bedchamber to the center of the palace, directly aligned with the rising sun, because his waking and sleeping were not private acts, they were rituals of power. The lever and couture, when waking and sleeping, became public every morning and night. King Louis XIV performed two ceremonies: le lever du roi, the king's rising; le coucher du roi, the king's going to bed, attended by dukes, clergy, high nobles, and sometimes foreign diplomats. These were no casual routines. They were staged, with a cast of rotating favorites who earned the right to present the king's robe, hand him his slippers, draw the curtains of the royal bed. To stand near his bed was to be seen. To be seen was to rise in court favor. So yes, falling asleep became a form of diplomacy. The bed, monumental and symbolic. Louis XIV's bed at Versailles was more than furniture. It was 8 feet wide, draped in gold-threaded velvet, framed in carved wood, painted with mythological scenes, guarded by a gilded balustrade, which nobles were forbidden to cross. The king rarely slept in it. In truth, he had private sleeping rooms elsewhere. But the main bed was ceremonial, used to project an image of absolute control and majesty. Even dying in bed was political. Louis XIV's deathbed became a 10-day public vigil. How the nobles slept or didn't. Versailles hosted thousands of nobles, many desperate to remain in favor. Their reward, rooms ranging from lavish to closets with straw. Some slept in shared rooms without windows, in linen-draped alcoves, smaller than modern bathrooms, on beds so short for fashionably upright sleeping that legs dangled off the edge. Why stay? Because being close to the king, even in discomfort, meant access to power, pensions, and gossip. They didn't sleep for rest. They slept for politics. The smell of Versailles at night, despite the grandeur. Versailles was, shall we say, olfactorily challenged. With no indoor plumbing, chamber pots overflowed, urine-soaked stairwells stank, perfume masked rot to sleep in. Versailles was to drift off under layers of scent, musk, incense, rotting flowers, and sweaty wigs. Even royal sheets, changed more often than most, couldn't fully erase the perfumed mildew of court life. Yet sleep happens, sometimes elegantly, sometimes not. Royal insomnia and medicinal sleep aids. Louis XIV suffered from sleeplessness, gout, and chronic pain. To aid sleep, he turned to warm milk with nutmeg, herbal infusions, specially valerian and poppy syrup, bed-warming pans filled with glowing coals, and, in moments of desperation, laudanum, alcoholic opium. physicians and astrologers debated the king's sleep with intensity, believing rest was a sign of cosmic harmony. If the king slept well, the kingdom thrived. If he tossed all night, it might mean war, witchcraft, or treason. Servants, who never slept below the silk and chandeliers. Servants worked round the clock. Valets stood ready during the couture, just in case the king needed a second pillow or a glass of sugared water. CHAMBERMAIDS changed sheets. Twice a day, night guards patrolled the halls with candles and keys, ensuring no assassins or intruders crept in. These workers often slept in stairwells, on benches, or not at all, taking naps in kitchens or behind curtains. For them, sleep was a stolen moment, not a right. Dreams and decorum unlike earlier centuries. The Age of Enlightenment brought a wave of skepticism about dreams. At Versailles, rationality was in, mysticism was out. Dreams were sometimes discussed as curiosities, but rarely interpreted spiritually. Nightmares were more likely blamed on indigestion than demons. Still, secret letters reveal that superstition survived behind closed doors. A duchess dreaming of fire might still fast the next day. A nobleman dreaming of death might donate to a monastery just in case. Fashion and sleepwear, dressing for bed sleep at Versailles, required dressing up. The elite slept in embroidered linen nightshirts, satin robes called deshabilles, bed caps stitched with family crests, and don't forget silk slippers for late night, pacing jeweled bed jackets for reading or receiving visitors. Some nobles received guests in bed, propped against pillows while sipping chocolate and conducting intrigue. Sleepwear was not for hiding. It was for hosting, lighting the night candles, lit Versailles thousands of them. A single couture ceremony might require 500 beeswax candles, placed in mirrored sconces to amplify light. This created an eternal twilight in corridors, rooms that flickered like opera stages, night scenes that felt sacred, surreal and theatrical. Candlelight blurred the lines between waking and sleeping. It made midnight look like magic. Sleep as control. Everything about sleep at Versailles was political theater. Where you slept, when you were invited to watch the king sleep, who saw you yawn, or nap, or retire early. Even how many pillows you had. The Sun King ruled not just with armies, but with routines. To control sleep was to control reality, and Versailles mastered it. Final thought. Tap. Versailles. Sleep was never simply sleep. It was costume. It was power. It was performance. The elite didn't rest to store their bodies. They rested to display their place in the world, down to the last silk ribbon, because at Versailles, the dreams didn't happen in bed. They happened around it. The age of machines. The death of midnight has. The sun set on the 18th century, and the 19th century dawned with clanging iron and hissing steam. The world changed dramatically. So did our sleep. The rise of factories, railways, and coal-powered cities demanded one thing above all: punctuality. Before this, humans mostly followed the sun or their bodies. But the Industrial Revolution replaced natural time with clock time. You didn't wake when you were rested. You woke when the whistle blew. Shift. Work. Sleeps. New enemy factories operated on shifts, many running 24 hours a day. To keep the machines moving, workers were assigned early morning, afternoon, or night shifts. Some shifts lasted 12 to 16 hours, Entire towns revolved around the factory bell, not the church bell or rooster's crow. And because jobs were scarce and punishments were brutal, people slept in snatches. Split sleep became compressed into a single, exhausted collapse. Families rarely saw each other at the same time. Industrialization didn't just change work, it warped time itself. The invention of the alarm clock, a weapon of order before factories, time was flexible. A nap at noon. Why not? Sleep early. Sure, but machines needed bodies on time. So, in the early 1800s, as towns industrialized, alarm clocks became common household items, first for the elite, then for the working class. The first adjustable, mechanical alarm clock was patented in 1847 by Antoine Redier, a Frenchman. Earlier versions existed in monasteries, but they rang only once. Redier's clock allowed people to choose their wake-up time for the first time in history. But not everyone had a clock. Enter the most surreal profession of the age, the knocker-up, the human alarm. In England and Ireland, especially in mill towns, people paid a knocker-up to wake them. This human alarm clock walked the streets before dawn, used a long bamboo pole to tap upper windows, or a pea shooter to ping glass panes with dried peas, waited for a sign the sleeper was awake. Some worked for a penny a week. Others were hired by factories themselves to ensure no one overslept and delayed production. Ironically, knocker-ups rarely slept themselves. They were often elderly women or children, the people not allowed in the factories but still trapped in the rhythm of the machines. Beds for the working poor, if you were lucky. In booming factory cities like Manchester, Leeds, and New York, tenement housing meant entire families or multiple families sharing a single room. Beds rented in 8 rotations called hot bedding, closing parenthesis. No privacy, no bedding, no silence. You didn't own your bed, you rented it by the hour. And since light was scarce, people slept beside smoking lamps, pounding pipes, and sometimes open sewer grates. Sleep became transactional, just another factory good. The role of gas and electric light. Artificial lighting extended the workday into the night. Gas lighting arrived in the early 1800s. Electric lighting boomed by the 1880s. This meant more hours awake, less natural sleep cues, a world where the body's clock no longer ruled. People now chose when to be awake, not based on sunset, but based on the factory clock or pub hours. Midnight lost its mystery. It became the end of second shift. Doctors declare war on sleep. Again by the late 1800s, physicians noticed increasing reports of insomnia, nervous disorders, and sleepwalking. They blamed overstimulation, artificial light, and mental strain from city living. But instead of slowing life down, the solution became medical. Chloral hydrate, a sedative, morphine, and later barbiturates. Sleep was no longer a gift of nature, but a chemical prescription. Women and sleep, a hidden crisis while men labored. In factories, women faced their own sleep crisis at home, caring for children, running households without servants, sometimes doing laundry or sewing for money deep into the night. Middle-class women were expected to be cheerful and rested, yet magazines warned them against laziness and oversleeping. The Victorian ideal of the delicate, sleeping beauty, often an illusion wrapped in lace and fatigue. The dreamless night dreaming began to fade from cultural importance. no time to reflect, no luxury of lying in bed after waking, no sacred pause between first and second sleep. Dreams became irrelevant, even suspicious. Only Freud, late in the 19th century, would attempt to revive their importance, though now as symptoms, not messages from the soul. The night had been industrialized, sleep had been sterilized. The new morality of sleep in this new world, how you slept reflected your value. Early risers were praised as hardworking, late sleepers were scorned. As lazy or immoral, children were drilled to wake at the bell. Soldiers, too. Even schools used bells to simulate factory life. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will, cried labor movements in the late 19th century. But that balance rarely achieved. Advertising and the selling of sleep by the early 1900s. Sleep had become a product. Ads began promoting patent mattresses like Sealy or Simmons, sleeping powders and tonics, pajamas as symbols of civilized modern life, and alarm clocks that proudly rang in the future posters showed bright-eyed men rising at 5 a.m., ready to conquer the day. They didn't show exhausted factory mothers or the 12-year-olds still rubbing soot from their eyes. The myth of productive sleep was born. Final thought: the industrial age gave us great cities, technologies, and revolutions, but it also broke sleep into units, shifts, and seconds. It turned a dreamy ritual into a ringing command, and perhaps most tragically of all, it made us feel guilty for wanting to rest before the bedroom, sleep without privacy till about the 1700s. The idea of a bedroom as we know it didn't really exist in ancient homes. People slept in communal rooms, often with livestock. Nearby, medieval peasants slept in single-room cottages, where sleeping, cooking, and birthing all happened in one open space. Even in castles, rooms were large and shared. A single great hall might contain a noble's bed and their servants sleeping. On the floor nearby, privacy wasn't a right, it was a luxury. Sleep, like everything else, was social. Curtained beds, proto-privacito, get any sense of solitude. People invented the four-poster bed with curtains in medieval and Renaissance homes, especially in colder climates. These beds provided warmth and visual separation. Nobles and royals even held meetings and meals in bed, sitting upright in full dress, surrounded by velvet curtains. But even then, the bed was not tucked away in a personal room. It was in the center of household life, often placed near the fireplace. The idea that sleep should be a private, that was still centuries away. The shift begins. Enlightenment and domestic reform in the 1700s. Enlightenment thinking began to change how people viewed the home. Cleanliness, order, and modesty became central values. Doctors and philosophers warned that crowded sleeping environments led to disease, immorality, and bad character. Architects started designing separate bedrooms for parents, children, and even servants. By the 1800s, the bedroom emerged not just as a room to sleep but as a space to reflect your identity, and with it came a new idea: personal sleep. The Victorian bedroom, a room with rules. In the 19th century, the middle class exploded, and with it, the cult of domesticity. Now, the home was not just a place of shelter, it was a moral symbol. Bedrooms became sanctuaries for women, designed for modesty, purity, and rest. places filled with embroidered linens, family portraits, and prayer books. Private spaces where women could dream, grieve, read, or recover out of the public eye. Even working-class homes began to imitate this, creating partitioned sleeping quarters, even if space was tight. For the first time, people could close a door and say, "This is my room. These are my dreams." Children get their own beds. For the 1800s, children often slept in the same bed as their parents, with siblings, cousins, or even household servants, on floor mats, benches, or in cribs only as infants. But in the Victorian era, pediatric experts and educators began emphasizing structure, routine, and early independence. Separate bedrooms and small beds for children became the norm, especially in wealthier homes. Children were taught to go to their room and sleep alone. A modern concept was born: childhood as a protected world, separate from adults even in sleep. Beds become objects of beauty. With the rise of bedrooms came the rise of decorative beds, carved wood frames in mahogany or oak, wrought iron headboards in romantic scrolls, quilts and lace pillows that showed off the homemaker's taste. The bed was no longer just a place to sleep. It was a statement about wealth, class, and culture. By the early 1900s, furniture, catalogs, and department stores promoted bedroom sets as essential for modern life. You weren't just buying a mattress, you were buying serenity, privacy, and progress. Bedrooms in apartments and suburbs as urbanization and industrialization grew. Beginning in the 20th century, offered the luxury of multiple bedrooms for growing families. Developers marketed the master bedroom as a status symbol, a private adult sanctuary with matching furniture and lighting. Now, even middle-class homes had children's rooms, guest rooms, and maybe a study that doubled as a napping spot. Private sleep had gone mainstream. The bedroom becomes emotional space in literature and film. Bedrooms took on new symbolism. Lovers reunited beneath canopies. Teens brooded on floral bedsheets. Elders died surrounded by pillows and silence. People cried in bedrooms. They wrote in journals, read novels, and had night thoughts they didn't share with the world. The bedroom became the room where we were most ourselves, and in sleep, that self could expand, drift, or disappear. The rise of the sleepover and the guest bedden, other side effect of private rooms. Sleep became invitable. Friends could stay the night in trundle beds or sleeping bags. Children had sleepovers, introducing nighttime play and bonding. Guest rooms became a symbol of generosity, even hospitality. No longer just necessity. Sleep became a social ritual, way to welcome others in. Without giving up your own space, nightwear evolves with privacy in communal sleep environments. Nightwear had to be modest and multi-use, but in private bedrooms, people began wearing looser, comfortable silk robes, cotton pajamas, and even nude sleep became possible. Lingerie as sleepwear also emerged, personal and unseen by anyone but a chosen few. In the 20th century, sleepwear was marketed as freedom to move, to breathe, to dream without spectators. The bedroom as safe spaces, the outside world grew. Louder cars, machines, noise, wars. The bedroom became our inner world. It was where we retreated from daily demands. We recharged our minds and bodies. We could shut a door and say, "Here, I am free." Even during global crisis wars, pandemics. Blackouts. People clung to their bedrooms as anchors of stability. The bedroom wasn't just a room, it was a boundary. The invention of the bedroom changed everything, from public halls and straw mats to warm, familiar spaces we call our own. Sleep became personal, not just a biological act, but an emotional ritual, a statement of worth, a return to self. And so, each night, as we fluff our pillows and pull the blankets over our eyes, we aren't just falling asleep, we're stepping into a room centuries in the making. From hay and horsehair to pocket springs and latex foam, let's rewind until the 19th century. Mattresses were humble creations, stuffed with straw, feathers, or horsehair, rested atop rope lattice, often sagging and needing to be tightened, giving us the phrase "sleep tight." Prone to mildew, mites, and smells, comfort was basic, and sleep surfaces were rarely replaced, passed down generations like furniture. But as industrialization expanded, so did ideas about comfort, cleanliness, and modernity. The mattress was about to be reinvented. The birth of the mattress industry by the late 1800s and early 1900s. Innerspring mattresses were patented. Upholstered mattresses became common in American and European households. Mattress manufacturers emerged, turning sleep into a standardized product. Companies like Simmons, 1870s, Sealy, 1880s, and Serta, 1930s, began branding beds with scientific claims and heavenly promises. The age of the mattress empire had arrived. Selling sleep to the masses, advertising revolutionized how people thought about beds. No longer just something to lie on, mattresses were now instruments of health, symbols of status, tools of romantic happiness. Mid-century ads proclaimed, "The foundation of a happy marriage is a good mattress," or "Sleep yourself younger on our patented dream coil." Even newspapers featured testimonials, doctor-backed sleep claims, and photos of smiling, spotless bedrooms. Comfort had become aspirational. The rise of sleep science and branding. As sleep became a public concern linked to productivity, beauty, and longevity, mattress companies began citing sleep studies, medical endorsements, and scientific features like pressure point relief, lumbar support, temperature regulation. It wasn't just about softness anymore. It was about alignment, support, and sleep hygiene. Mattresses were marketed like medical devices, complete with charts, graphs, and expert endorsements. Try it for 100 nights. The online sleep revolution. Fast forward to the 2010s, enter the mattress Cinebox era, with companies like Casper, Purple, Tuft, and Needle. These brands disrupted the old mattress showroom model by offering online ordering, free delivery, 100+ night trial periods, risk-free returns. What they really sold was simplicity, millennial minimalism, and a clean, modern image of sleep, often shot in sunlit lofts with linen, duvets, and minimalist lamps. No more dusty mattress stores. Just click, unroll, and dream. Celebrity sleep culture today. Sleep is endorsed by influencers, athletes, and CEOs. LeBron James swears by 10 to 12 hours of sleep a night for recovery. Ariana Huffington founded the sleep revolution after collapsing from exhaustion. Wellness gurus post about sleep routines, melatonin cocktails, and sleep tracking rings. Suddenly, sleep isn't lazy, it's elite. You're not wasting time in bed, you're optimizing your health. The sleep economy, a multi-billion-dollar dream, the global sleep economies. Its effings now worth over $500 billion. It includes mattresses and bedding, sleep trackers, and smart devices, white noise machines, blue light blocking glasses, luxury pajama brands, even weighted blankets with NASA certified tech. Sleep is no longer a passive activity. It's a purchased performance. Mattress showdowns, memory, foam versus hybrid versus latex. Each mattress empire has its weapon of choice. Memory foam, championed by Tempur-Pedic, soft, contouring, absorbs movement. INNERSPRING, traditional, firm, bouncy. BREATHABLE. Hybrid, modern trend, combines coils plus foam. Latex, eco-looks, all natural, durable, expensive. Consumers now compare coil counts, cooling gel layers, and zone technology. The way people once compared horse breeds. Sleep is technical, tactile, and deeply personal. The language of luxury sleep mattresses are now described with vocabulary once reserved for wine plush. Airy, full-bodied cars, performance-driven, hybrid responsive, and luxury hotels, signature feel, cloud-like comfort bed. Performance, prestige. Do we sleep better, or just spend more? For all the innovation, studies show people today sleep less than they did 100 years ago. Insomnia, anxiety, and burnout are rising. Many struggle despite having the perfect mattress. Why? Because sleep is about more than surfaces. It's about space, stillness, and permission to rest, things marketing can't always give us. Sometimes we're lying on memory foam, but our minds are made of noise. Final thought: the modern mattress is a miracle of science and salesmanship. It cradles, supports, and whispers promises. But real sleep doesn't come from coils or cooling gel. It comes when we let go. Maybe that's the final trick capitalism hasn't quite sold yet. Trust, safety, surrender. Because no matter how perfect the bed, sleep-like dreams still lives just beyond the label. Once upon a time, night meant darkness. Not long ago, night was simple. The sun set, candles flickered, conversation slowed. We slept. But the 21st century never truly goes dark. Instead, night is lit up by phones, laptops, TVs, and notifications that never sleep. We now carry light in our pockets, and with it, the ability to stay awake forever. The rise of the backlit bedtime, though. Smartphones became mainstream in the late 2000s. The bedroom changed. Alarm clocks became apps. Diaries became notes apps. Late night thoughts turned into tweets. Now we don't just lie in bed. We scroll, tap, post, swipe, stream, zoom, edit, shop, and watch the world. Screens followed us under the covers. And sleep began to slip away. The blue light problem. Biologically, humans are designed to respond to natural light. Blue light, found in sunlight, helps keep us alert during the day. At night, when the sun disappears, our brain releases melatonin, a hormone that prepares us for sleep. But screens also emit blue light, especially LED screens. And guess what we're all doing at midnight? Watching YouTube, chatting on WhatsApp, reading Wikipedia, or doom scrolling the news. The result: melatonin is suppressed. The brain thinks it's daytime. We stay wired, but exhausted. The infinite scroll-trapped tech companies don't want us to sleep. Not really. Social media, streaming platforms, and news apps are designed to keep us awake. With autoplay videos, endless scrolling, notifications that arrive just as we put the phone down, we promise ourselves just one more post, but the algorithm never runs out, and suddenly it's 2:47 a.m. again. Sleep disorders in the smartphone era. Doctors are seeing a new kind of insomnia. It's not from trauma or stress, it's from technology itself. Symptoms include trouble falling asleep, waking up frequently to check your phone, anxiety if the phone is out of reach, reduced deep sleep and REM disruption, fatigue even after 8 hours in bed. There's even a name: vamping, staying up late, alone, on devices, even when tired, just to feel in control. Because in a world that moves non-stop, night scrolling feels like the only time that belongs to us. The bedroom becomes a control center today. Many people use their beds as a home office, a gaming lounge, a streaming studio, a shopping mall, and a therapy session. The result: your brain stops associating your bed with rest. It thinks, here is where we work, here is where we get overstimulated, here is where we don't shut down. It's no wonder we can't sleep. Phones beside pillows. The new normal surveys show over 70% of people sleep with their phone within arm's reach. Nearly half check it within 5 minutes of waking up. A third check it in the middle of the night, often involuntarily. What used to be a sacred moment, the border between dream and reality, has been replaced by flashing screens, news alerts, TikTok dopamine hits, and texts from 3 time zones away. Night mode and other digital band-aids. Tech companies know there's a problem, so they offer night shift, dark mode, sleep focus, do not disturb, meditation apps like Calm, Headspace, or Insight Timer. Smartwatches and sleep rings that track your rest and assign it a score. But even these solutions keep us engaged with the very tech we're trying to escape. We're trying to use digital tools to fix a digital problem: sleep. As resistance in a world that demands constant availability, choosing to sleep is almost rebellious. To turn off your phone at 10 p.m., that's resistance. To not reply instantly to a message, that's boundary setting. To leave an email unanswered overnight, that's reclaiming your brain. Some people are pushing back with phone-free bedrooms, analog alarm clocks, reading physical books, and even digital sunsets, turning off screens an hour before bed. Not because they don't love technology, but because they love their peace more. The loneliness of the late night scroll. Ironically, digital night is often a lonely place. We scroll to feel connected, but find ourselves comparing, worrying, wondering why everyone else seems okay in the silence of 3 a.m. The curated photos and motivational tweets can feel alienating. We're surrounded by connection, but somehow feel more alone than ever. Sleep could help, but the phone keeps whispering, stay just a few more minutes. The kids aren't all right. Teenagers today are sleeping less than any previous generation. Why? School pressures, social anxiety, and most of all, constant screen use. Sleep deprivation in teens leads to mood swings, impaired memory, weakened immune systems, depression, and anxiety. And yet, devices remain glued to their hands even in bed, under the blankets, past midnight. Some schools now teach sleep hygiene alongside physical health, but it's a tough fight especially when adults are also glued to their screens. Final thought: the digital world gave us endless information, connection, and entertainment, but it also blurred the lines between day and night, wake and rest, outside and inside. We didn't lose sleep by accident. We traded it for likes, replies, relevance, and noise. But here's the secret: the screen will still be there. Tomorrow, your dreams won't. You deserve sleep, not because you earned it, but because you're human, and no algorithm knows what you truly need. So tonight, maybe just once, power down. Close your eyes. Let the real world dim. You're allowed to rest. We're not meant to be machines. Somewhere along the way, we started treating sleep like a weakness, a delay, a non-productive block of time. We said things like, sleep is for the dead. I'll rest when I'm successful. Coffee is my personality. But the body keeps the score, and the soul whispers what we forget. Sleep isn't just maintenance, it's meaning. The science catches pin recent years. Sleep has gone from ignored to essential in medicine. Studies now show sleep boosts memory, emotion, creativity, and immune health. Chronic sleep loss increases risk of heart disease, anxiety, and dementia. Even short naps can enhance decision-making and problem-solving. Hospitals track patient sleep. Therapists prescribe rest like medicine. CEOs talk about it on podcasts. We are, at last, learning to value rest, not just tolerate it. The rise of sleep culture, strangely. Rest is having a renaissance. Sleep retreats are popping up worldwide, quiet sanctuaries with no Wi-Fi, no meetings, no goals except stillness. As Mr. Videos, sleep podcasts, and guided meditations are downloaded millions of times each night. Bookstores have shelves labeled sleep and recovery beside health and wellness. There are now dream journals sold at stationery boutiques, breathwork coaches, nap cafes in Tokyo, weighted blankets considered essential, and even luxury hotels boasting sleep concierges. We're not there yet, but something is shifting. Rebuilding our relationship with sleep in the quiet corners of our lives. We're relearning how to rest. It often starts small, putting the phone away at 10 p.m., reading a paper book instead of watching Netflix, wearing an eye mask. Reading a paper book instead of watching Netflix, wearing an eye mask, lighting a candle, noticing the weight of the blanket, letting ourselves feel tired without guilt. Sleep no longer needs to be earned. It's not a badge or a brag, it's a birthright. Sleep as resistance in a culture that demands hustle, attention, and productivity. Choosing to rest is radical. You say, I am not a product. I deserve dreams. I am not available right now. To rest is to reclaim your humanity from the machine, to lie down in a world that won't stop spinning and close your eyes anyways, an act of quiet power. Dreaming as a language. Dreams, once banished by logic and science, are returning to dream work, is now part of many therapy practices. Artists, musicians, and poets speak openly about their dream lives. Even scientists are mapping the emotional logic of dreams and how they help us process memory, grief, and fear. You don't have to interpret your dreams. You just have to welcome them. They are your inner language, not of reason, but of truth. Creating sleep sanctuaries. People today are building sacred spaces to support their rest. Soundscapes that mimic nature, rain, forests, ocean tides, Aromatherapy using lavender, cedarwood, and sandalwood. Weighted blankets that mimic the womb. Low-lit bedrooms, blackout curtains, and cool air. Furniture that curves, hugs, and softens. The goal isn't luxury, it's permission. We're learning that sleep doesn't just come when summoned. It comes when we invite it. Rest isn't laziness. It's literacy. Rest. Literacy means knowing when you need stillness, feeling when your energy dips, recognizing what kind of rest you need, physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual. Sometimes we don't need 8 hours. We need a walk with no phone, a quiet afternoon doing nothing, a long exhale in the bath, a nap under a tree. Sleep is only one form of rest, but it's the one that roots all others. The future of sleep. Less data, more trustees. We now have sleep trackers. Yes, we can monitor REM cycles and adjust smart beds. Yes, AI can tell us how efficient our sleep is. But sometimes, more data leads to more anxiety. The future of sleep might not be more gadgets. It might be less measurement. Return to listening to your body, trusting your fatigue, embracing imperfection. You don't have to sleep like a robot. You just have to rest like a person. Final thought. The full circle end. So we return, full circle, from cavemen huddled in caves, to nobles curling in velvet chambers, to factory workers chasing shifts, to us lying awake beside glowing screens. Sleep has always followed us, quietly, faithfully, even when we ignored it. Now, perhaps, we are ready to meet it again, not as a stranger, not as an enemy, but as a friend. So, tonight, whenever you're ready, turn the page, turn off the light, let the history fade, and let sleep, that ancient and patient visitor, hold you gently once more.